Howdy folks, welcome to God in Genesis class for May 10th, 2020. We are still unable to have our Sunday school class in person due to the COVID-19 epidemic, so here we go. Our study passage today is Genesis 21, verses 22 to 34. The author, Leonard Sweet, shares the following that happened to him a while back. Tom Wells served as a stint as university chaplain at Grand Canyon University in Phoenix, Arizona. A few years ago, he picked me up at the Phoenix airport in his new Ford pickup and whisked me away to keynote a leadership conference at the university. Since I was still mourning the trade-in of my Dodge truck, we immediately bonded, sharing truck stories and laughing at the bumper sticker truism, "Nothing is more beautiful than a man and his truck." As I climbed into his 2002 Ranger for the ride back to the airport a day later, I noticed two big scrapes by the passenger door. "What happened here?" I asked. "My neighbor's basketball post fell and left those dents and white scars," Tom replied with a downcast voice. "You're kidding. How awful," I commiserated. "This truck is so new I can smell it. What's even worse is my neighbor doesn't feel responsible for the damage." Rising to my newfound friend's defense, I said, "Did you contact your insurance company? How are you going to help get him to pay for it?" "This has been a real spiritual journey for me," Tom replied. After a lot of soul searching and discussions with my wife about hiring an attorney, it came down to this. I can either be in the right or I can be in a relationship with my neighbor. Since my neighbor will probably be with me longer than this truck, I decided that I'd rather be in a relationship than be right. Besides, trucks are meant to be banged up, so I got mine initiated into the real world a bit earlier than I expected. How much do you value relationships? It all comes down to that one question. What value do we place on relationships? I'd like to segue just a little bit. It's on the topic of relationships, but it has to do with the value of relationships. The slide is called The Ministry of Relationships. It's a bit of a bunny trail here at the start of this class. We all understand the need for us to be a Christian witness to folks we come in contact with. Some of us tend to place the responsibility for outreach somewhere besides ourselves. That's what we pay the preacher for, we say. They can come to Sunday school or church to hear the gospel. That's why we have special meetings to invite people down that sawdust trail to receiving Christ. I'd like you to observe the chart. On this chart, the percentage of people who come to Christ as a result of a relationship, a friendship. They were led to Christ through the ministry of a friend. Approximately 75% of those coming to Christ said they came because of a friendship. Just small percentages through other means. Special needs ministries were a small percentage, walk-ins to church, listening to the preacher, Sunday school, special meetings, etc. What I'm doing today is highlighting the importance of building relationships and how important relationships should be to us. Okay, the introduction to the class this morning. The first point is life is all about relationships. The rest is just details. This is a quote from Gary Smalley's book, The DNA of Relationships. Relationships with those around us, our relationship with God. All of us here today have developed relationships in our short lifetimes. And when the COVID-19 lockdown lifts, we can hopefully reestablish some of the contacts that we have been missing here recently. I am told that relationships are taking a beating these COVID days because of the close confinement of families with real relationship issues present in their homes. Life is all about relationships. There are as many different relationships as there are people to have them. You have your relationships to deal with, and I have mine. They're not the same because the people are not the same and the situations are different. 7 relational people types. John Maxwell identifies 7 people types and the resulting relationship issues. You've seen all of them and have to deal with some or all of them. The first one is the Sherman tank. These people lead by intimidation. They will try to roll right over you with, "I'm right, you're wrong," an aggressive attitude. A lot of us get run over by this type, and we resent it. The second one is called the Space Cadet. They live in their own world. They don't respond normally. Life must be simple in order for them to function. The next one is a volcano. They are explosive and unapproachable. The book of Proverbs warns us not to keep company with an angry man for good reason. The next one is the thumbsucker. This person is just full of pouting and self-pity. They are always a victim in their own minds. Then there's the wet blanket. These folks see a problem with every solution. It doesn't matter what brilliant plan you come up with. Then there is the garbage collector. They surround themselves with negative people and point out the worst in people. These folks turn into volcanoes eventually as the bitterness works its terrible roots down into their very soul. And finally, there is the user. They view others as a resource and will drain them of both time and energy if that's what it takes to make them feel better. You and I both have known these folks. There are things we can do to make any relationship situation better or worse. Hopefully we would choose better, and we can do that. We can work with relationships. Some seem impossible. He's the thumbsucker. He's a space cadet. She's a garbage collector. He's nothing but a volcano. Whenever I say something to him, he just blows up. It's not worth it. Some we like to run away from. God does not put us in a situation that we cannot handle in some way that is constructive. He provides a way. He gives the strength needed. He gives the wisdom. He makes the support available. But we have to be willing to take action. Good relationships do not usually just happen on their own. Some need a lot of attention. You know of a high-maintenance relationship surrounding you. I know you do. Some need constant effort. Some are easier than others. Today's story, or Bible passage, centers around a well of water. Important thing, those wells. Lots of effort to dig. They made the raising of animals in the area possible. They became a center for communities. There was a lot of meetings that went on there in the times of Abraham. Lots of sharing among, especially the women, I believe. It was kind of like a social media place of today. There is Abimelech here in our lesson today. We have seen him before, a few lessons back. He was the king of Gerar. He gave Abraham his wife Sarah back after God spoke to him in a dream. He gave Abraham presents also at that time, sheep and oxen and men servants and maid servants. He seems to have been a good man. He feared God. He was reasonable. He has a lieutenant with him today. His name is Phicol. He's commander of his army. He's his right-hand man. We can learn from the actions and reactions of both Abraham and Abimelech in our passage today from Genesis chapter 21. And we want to do that. How to build good relationships, how to build better relationships, and what works in relationship building. Okay, now we want to go ahead and read our study passage from Genesis 21, verse 22 and following. At that time, Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, said to Abraham, "God is with you in all that you do. Now therefore swear to me here by God that you will not deal falsely with me, or with my descendants, or with my posterity, but as I have dealt kindly with you, so you will deal with me and with the land where you have sojourned." And Abraham said, "I will swear." When Abraham reproved Abimelech about a well of water that Abimelech's servants had seized, Abimelech said, "I do not know who has done this thing. You did not tell me, and I have not heard of it until today." So Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them to Abimelech, and the two men made a covenant. Abraham set 7 ewe lambs of the flock apart. And Abimelech said to Abraham, "What is the meaning of these 7 ewe lambs that you have set apart?" He said, "These 7 ewe lambs you will take from my hand, that this may be a witness for me that I dug this well." Therefore, that place was called Beersheba, because both of them swore an oath. So they made a covenant at Beersheba. Then Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, rose up and returned to the land of the Philistines. Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba and called there on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. And Abram sojourned many days in the land of the Philistines. Okay, what we want to do today in this lesson is to look at 5 areas of relationship building that we see modeled, if you will, in our Bible lesson today by Abraham and Abimelech. 5 areas of relationship building that we can also learn from and we can do ourselves. The first one is be proactive. And I'd like to make some points here. The first is, if we neglect relationships, they will deteriorate. Relationships work like everything else. Relationships are subject to deterioration. The whole universe is not evolving, as most people would say, but it is, in fact, deteriorating. After it was created, the universe began deteriorating. It was the best when it was first made. It's been going downhill ever since. Leave anything alone and it does not get better, only worse. Evolution cannot happen. Devolution does, yes, but not evolution on its own. Maybe that's why dating relationships seem to prosper and marriages can easily go downhill. The wooing stops. The effort slacks off. We think we're all home and dry, or are we? Second point is that there are things we can do as preventative maintenance in our relationships. Small, relatively easy things that can make a huge difference down the road. Things we do to make things continue to run smoothly. Part of a good preventative maintenance program is a good awareness. What are the potential problems? What can be done to avoid those problems? What is a plan for me to take before problems occur? How can I be proactive in my relationships? In today's lesson, Abimelech was proactive, and he's the example for us here. Let's not wait until there is wholesale conflict. Let's work it out. He presented a simple request. Return the kindness that I have shown to you. Be aware of what I have done to you. Return it. This was Abimelech's request to the patriarch Abraham. Abimelech saw potential problems. Abraham had a lot of animals and huge needs for water. He recognized that God was blessing Abraham and that he would be around. He recognized that he would not be able to get rid of Abraham. He recognized that they would need to work together. Reading from our study passage, verse 22 to 24. At that time, Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, said to Abraham, "God is with you in all that you do. Now therefore swear to me here by God that you will not deal falsely with me or with my descendants or with my posterity, but as I have dealt kindly with you, so you will deal with me and with the land where you have sojourned." And Abraham said, "I will swear." What relationship do you have that needs some preventative maintenance? We know that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Do you need to talk to a neighbor whose cows you had to chase back through the fence once again? Maybe it's your cows or horses. Should you be taking your wife out for dinner this week, especially since it's Mother's Day? Maybe some evening, or maybe you'd have to wait a few weeks until this COVID crisis eases. Should you be spending extra time with one of your children who needs more time with his dad? Are you avoiding someone in the church? Have you been convicted to have some family from the church over for the evening to reach out to somebody that has special needs? The relationships that you have will not get better on their own. You invest in a relationship and it has what it needs to get better. You neglect it and it will only deteriorate. These things do not happen on their own. The results of preventative maintenance are not always immediately obvious. Over time, they do pay off. It's the way to go. So much easier to maintain than to come up with something new. Less expensive, too. So that's principle number 1. Be proactive in your relationships. And I wish we could all learn that. I need to learn that. Be proactive in relationships. Do that preventative thing. And reach out ahead of time before the big problems develop. The second one is to deal honestly with others. And I would get that principle from verses 23 and 24 of our Bible study passage in Genesis 21. He says, "Now therefore swear to me here by God that you will not deal falsely with me or with my descendants." This is Abimelech talking. "Or with my posterity, but as I have dealt kindly with you, so you will deal with me and with the land where you have sojourned." And Abraham said, "I will swear." So far, Abimelech knew 2 things about his friend Abraham. One, that God was prospering Abraham, that he was special to God and God was looking out for him. God was on his side. The second thing he knew about Abraham was that Abraham had a problem with honesty. He learned that from his previous encounter with the patriarch Abraham. When he came into the neighborhood the last time with his lovely wife Sarah, he said, "She's my sister. She really is honest. Incidentally, she's my wife as well, but I won't mention that." We need to deal honestly with others. Ephesians 4, verse 14 says, "So that we may no longer be children, tossed to and fro by the waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness and deceitful schemes, rather speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ. From whom the whole body, joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love." Verse 25, "Therefore, having put away falsehood, let each of you speak the truth with his neighbor, for we are members one of another." There is a real need for tact in Christian relationships. We do not need to say everything that we know. There are some things better left unsaid. I read the story of the editor of a small town newspaper who grew tired of being called a liar and announced that he would tell the truth in the future. The next issue contained the following item: "Married, Miss Sylvan Rhodes and James Collins, last Saturday at the Baptist Parsonage, by the Reverend J. Gordon. The bride is a very ordinary town girl who doesn't know any more about cooking than a jackrabbit and never helped her mother 3 days in her life. She's not a beauty by any means and has got a gait like a duck. The groom is an up-to-date loafer. He has been living off the old folks at home all his life and now is worth shucks. It will be a hard life." It's one thing to spruce things up a little bit. It's another thing to deceive. The intent to deceive is not only wrong, but it destroys trust. When trust is lost, we have lost everything in a relationship. No trust, no worthwhile relationship. Charles Swindoll says, "Honesty has a beautiful and refreshing simplicity about it. No ulterior motives, no hidden meanings, an absence of hypocrisy, duplicity, political games, and verbal superficiality. As honesty and real integrity characterize our lives, there will be no need to manipulate others." The third point here is that the number one builder of relationships is trust. Proving that you can be trusted, delivering as promised, trying to be transparent. But how do we build trust? You know what you need to do to build trust. It's like credit in the money world. You've got to build that credit. I learned that as a young person. It's very important to build good credit. All of us have a credit score that's logged with the 3 credit bureaus out there. And you may not realize as a young person that you are building a credit score, but you are. And you can request that credit score to see what it is. And you should do that every once in a while so that you do not get a surprise when you go out to get a loan or something like that needs a good credit score. And when you go, you may not have a good score, even though you have never had bad credit. You just have no credit. You have not proved yourself to be able to pay back a debt. It takes time to prove that you are credit worthy. It doesn't take much time to destroy that rating. That credit is much like the trust that we build in relationships. It takes time to build. It is so important to do. It takes time. It takes effort. And you know the extra precautions you need to take in order to build trust in your relationships. It takes a whole lot of time. It takes carefulness. It takes willingness to make confession for wrongdoing. So that's the second point. The first one was be proactive in relationships. Secondly, deal honestly with others. The third one out of the 5 that we'll look at today that are modeled by the characters in our story is be open to resolving past conflict. And I'll start by saying that conflict is a part of life. Most of us do not enjoy conflict. I especially don't. We would love to say that there's none in our relationships, but that's not true. We could be like the proverbial ostrich with our head in the sand. What conflicts, we say? What problem? I see nothing. Doesn't change the reality of the situation. So it's happening under the rug. Number 2, Abraham could have kept quiet about a problem he had with Abimelech. Many of us are tempted to do that with a conflict that we see. We want to keep quiet. He was probably tempted not to say anything, but he was a man. He had what it took. He was willing to broach the issue. Reading from our study passage, Genesis 21, verse 25 says, when Abram reproved Abimelech about a well of water that Abimelech's servants had seized, Abimelech said, I do not know who has done this thing. You did not tell me, and I have not heard of it until today. So Abraham comes up, he says, as a matter of fact, I do have a problem. Let's put shoe leather to this talk of a covenant and trust that we're talking about. Here's what happened. Let's put this right on the table. Let's put this thing to a test. Let's get practical here. Ignoring past issues does not make them go away. We wish it would. The pile under the rug just keeps getting bigger. Even a pot that is simmering on the stove will eventually build steam pressure. When we first bought our house back in Gladys, Virginia, some 30 years ago, it had a termite problem. It should have been addressed before the previous owner sold the place to us, and a termite inspection was required for sale, but they obviously didn't see this, or maybe it was just glossed over. Whatever the case, we had a problem. Those little critters would come boring out of the woodwork around a certain doorway in our home. We could have painted it over. We could have replaced the woodwork that had holes in it. We could have recovered the existing woodwork with brand new, shining, beautiful woodwork. We could have done many things to temporarily cover up the problem. We had a deep problem. We needed to take care of the problem. We did. We got the exterminators to come. They bored holes under the foundation and killed the colonies of termites. We spent a lot of money. We paid a price to have the problem taken care of. Even though we had not had any issues for the 28 years that we owned that house, we still had these people come out and check out these issues every year. Ignoring an issue is like trying to cover up termites. It will not work for long. You have to go at it and get it cleared up properly for there to be a lasting cure. It takes a person of character to address issues that we know are there and to get them resolved. Matthew 18, verse 15 says, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. If we allow things to just linger between us and a brother or sister, we cannot have a good relationships. There's a burr under the saddle of our relationship. There's a pebble in our shoe. There's no freedom between us. We must be careful how we approach people to set things straight. How this is handled will make most of the difference in whether the confrontation works as intended. Have we made it a real matter of prayer? What is our attitude toward this person? What is our goal for this confrontation? What do we want to happen? What is our goal for our relationship? We dare not come out with guns blazing. We dare not shoot from the hip. Do we have enough character to address the issue? Are we wimps in our relationships? The problem may just be a communication issue we don't understand. Once we talk it out, it will clear itself up. Many times that's all it takes. But we must take that step. Okay, point number 4, do not make any assumptions. Our text, verse 25 to 26, says, when Abram reproved Abimelech about a well of water that Abimelech's servants had seized, Abimelech said, I do not know who has done this thing. You did not tell me, and I have not heard of it until today. Building relationships involves good communication skills. We have got to be willing to talk to people. We've got to be willing to listen to people. Some people love to talk, just always talking, like to hear the sound of their own voice. That has its drawbacks and dangers. Some of us like to be quiet. Lots of times that will avoid problems. It can also create problems. We can make wrong assumptions. We can have misunderstandings that could be avoided by talking. How well do you communicate with those around you is the question. I read about a mature-looking lady who had an appointment with a marriage counselor and told him flat out, I would like to divorce my husband. To this, the counselor replied, well, do you have any grounds? She answered, well, yes. We have almost an acre. The puzzled counselor asked her, you don't understand. What I want to know is, do you and your husband have a grudge? The lady answered, actually we don't, but we do have a nice carport. At this, the counselor shook his head and said, ma'am, I'm sorry, but I just don't see any reason why you should divorce your husband. The lady looked at the counselor and said to him, it's just that the man can't carry on an intelligent conversation. I can't answer for you. I can say that regardless of how much you talk, you do not communicate as well as you think you do. It's a skill that we need to work on. We need to ask questions. We need to repeat answers back in different words to make sure that you understand. Relationships cannot grow unless there's good communication. Misunderstandings will abound, hurts will abound, walls will abound, anger and frustration will abound. Point number 2 is we must make the extra effort to communicate. We must make the extra effort to understand. We must go the third mile to clear things up. We must use care. We must make ourselves clear. Our study passage, verse 31, says, therefore that place was called Beersheba, because there both of them swore an oath. So they made a covenant at Beersheba. Then Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, rose up and returned to the land of the Philistines. Beersheba means well of an oath. Abram and Abimelech had a clear understanding. In building relationships, we have covered 4 steps that we can learn, that we can glean good truths from in this study passage. The first one was be proactive in relationships, deal honestly with others. Number 3, be open to resolving past conflict. And number 4, don't make assumptions. Finally, I want to look at number 5, keep God in the center of your life. In all of our earthly relationships, the stabilizing factor must be our relationship with God. He makes better earthly relationships possible. Verses 33 and 34 of our study passage again. Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba and called there on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. And Abraham sojourned many days in the land of the Philistines. Abraham built altars where he went, and when he didn't build altars, he was in trouble. Here again, he called on God, the everlasting God. He built a tamarisk tree as a reminder, I suppose, and called there on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. All of our dealings with earthly relationships must be bathed in prayer. Seek God's face constantly. Seek His wisdom. Seek His insight from the one who can see inside man's heart. Number 3, trust Him for results in relationships. We must do our part. We must trust Him for results. Let's do it. It will be worth any effort that we can make. Okay, I want to wrap up this Bible study this morning. This is a great story about the patriarch Abraham and a meeting with the heathen king Abimelech. And we can learn some valuable lessons, relationship lessons from the interaction between these two men. Be proactive in relationships, deal honestly with others, be open to resolving past conflict, don't make assumptions, and finally keep God in the center of your life. That's it then. Thanks, folks, for listening, and you have a good day. God bless.